Okay, so now that we have a player, a floor, and a barrier with some movement, now we can start playing our game. Click the play button. And I lost. Try that again. And I lost again. I'm noticing a theme here. Okay. So what our game is currently missing is a way for us to avoid this barrier, right? It's there, it's in our way, we know it's an obstacle, and we want to defeat that obstacle. How we defeat that obstacle is by getting our player to move either left or right to get around this obstacle. Currently, we don't have a way of doing that. Normally, when you would do this, you would take some form of command or input from our key. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at our keyboard, decide what button we want to be for movement, in this case left and right, and then make it so that when we hit the key it moves. That's our plan. Let's get to it. So we're going to go in here, and we have our player. We're going to go into our script, which is the player controller script. That's where all of the controls for the players are supposed to live, right? So we'll open that in Visual Studio. All right, player controller. Here inside the update method, we want to make it so that every single frame, it will check to see if I have pressed a key. And if I have pressed a key, it will do the corresponding command. In this case, add a force to the player. Now we already know how to add a force to the player. That's this script right here. In this case, it adds a force to the z-axis, which is a float. So we don't want to change that because we want our player to continuously move forward. We just want to add another force on top of that, either to the left or right, depending on what key we press. So for this, I think I'm going to use the traditional left arrow and right arrow keys on my keyboard. So right now we have to have our computer ask a question. If I press the left arrow key, then the cube, our player, should move to the left. So we kind of already hinted on how you do that. This is called an if command because we're asking if something happens. So in my text window here, all I have to do is click on if. And see, it even kind of tells us that this is a snippet for an if statement. So we know we're on the right track. In C#, the condition of that if, in our case, the left key being pressed, has to live inside these two little parentheses. So if, open parenthesis, we take an input, and see, all I have to do is type it, and it kind of tells us what we're going for. So this is interfaces with the input system. Input is keys, mouse, anything like that. Input. And then I hit dot to get all of the commands that I could have underneath the input system. I can type in, I want to get a key press, right? So I'm getting, and then we have a couple different options. Key down, which is when the user presses down a key. Sweet. We have key up, which is when the user releases the key. We have get key, when the user holds down the key. Oh, that seems pretty useful actually. So let's try get key. All right, now let's mouse over it, and it looks like it wants to get the key within the type key code. Don't know what that is, so let's just type in open parentheses because this is still going inside a function. Key code. All right, there's our key code. And then maybe a dot. Oh look, we have a whole list of all the keys. So we want to look for the up arrow, right? So up arrow. There we go. And then we're going to make sure that we close our parentheses. Now if we look here, it actually tells us that, right? It expected a closing parenthesis. Boop. And there's still a little bit of red there, so let's mouse over it. It expected a semicolon. I gave it its semicolon, but it's still saying that something is interesting here. I have a little green arrow there. So if I mouse over it, it's not an error, because an error would be a red squiggly line. This is a green squiggly line. It says, possible mistake, an empty statement. So this is saying that I have a kind of like a grammar mistake. So I've asked for an input, but I haven't told it what to do when it gets that input. So instead of a semicolon, because this is a question, not a statement, right? A semicolon goes at the end of a statement, like a I did this thing, not a did I do this thing? So instead of a semicolon there, I'm going to put little curly brackets. These curly brackets are where I put in what I want the program to do if this condition is true. So if the input system hears that I have pressed the up arrow, I want it to apply a force to my player, which is this code right here. So player.add force, and then how do I want it to go? Do I want it in the X position, the Y position, or the Z position? I'm not sure. Let's go back to our game for a second. So if I'm here, let's double click on our player cube. There he is. And I can see up here that the left and right is the X position. So Y is up, X is side to side, and Z is in and out. So I want to modify its X position. So back here, I'll say I'll add a force, and then the first number is the X. So let's add, say, 20 to the X. And I don't need anything in the Y, and I don't need anything in the Z. Because this is the end of statement, it is expecting a semicolon. There it goes. So let's go test this, because this is a lot of code and some weird stuff popped up. So let's make sure. So I'm going to hit File, Save. Go back to my code, and then press the button. I'm hitting my left key, but nothing seems to be happening, which is weird because it didn't pop up with any errors. So let's go back and look at our code just for a minute. Okay, let's follow the logic. Player adds a force on the update of its forward speed, which is in the Z direction. All right, so that works, and we saw our cube was rolling forward, so that's good. Now, if the input of get key is the key for the up arrow. Oh, I see what I did. I accidentally put the up arrow instead of the left arrow for this. Now, this is not a programmatic error. It's not actually coming up as anything that I did wrong. I simply did not tell the computer to do what I actually wanted to tell the computer to do. And this is a fascinating thing that comes up in programming all the time. The code will run and do exactly what you tell it to do. So if your code is giving you some weird thing that you're not expecting to have happen, go back and double check your instructions. There's a good chance that it's doing everything you told it to do correctly. You just wanted it to do something other than what you told it to do. So in this case, if we just change this from up arrow to left arrow, let's see what that does. File, save, go back to Unity. I hit the left arrow. Whoop! Well, it worked, kind of. My left arrow makes the cube go right. So let's go back into our code again and change this left arrow to right arrow. Save again. Go back. Right arrow makes a move right. Awesome. So you can see that it might not give you the correct thing that you're looking for it to do the first time. Coding is a experience that takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to be able to make sure that you're telling and working with the computer in the right way. Experiment often. Keep working on it. If the code doesn't do something that you're exactly looking for it to do, that's fine and that's expected. It is going to fail a few times. Coding is hard, right? The lovely thing about coding, though, is that you can literally just go back and then hit the backspace key and change it. What I don't recommend doing is I would not suggest saying, oh no, it doesn't work, and just deleting all the code. There's a couple reasons for this. One, somewhere in this code is where the error is. It's called debugging your code to find where that error is. If you just erase it and start from scratch, chances are you'll make the same exact error again because you didn't investigate to see what was wrong. So go into your code, look, debug your code, try and figure out what's wrong. And if you need to ask someone else for help, the first thing they're going to ask is to see your code. So if you go up to them and say that you deleted all your code, then they are not going to be able to help you. Okay? So go forth, create the code, and then if it doesn't work the way you expect it to work, go back and look for those little red arrows, or read through your code exactly to see if you put an up arrow instead of a right arrow. So now that we have our code and we can see that it works for the right arrow and goes in the positive 20 direction, which is to the right, now we have to make the same exact code for the left button. And this is where you come in. Make this code, but modify it so that it works for the left arrow. That is your challenge. When it is working, you should be able to go back into your Unity editor, hit play, and avoid that square without falling off, returning to the center. So we can see in this, both our left arrow and right arrow work. And that is your challenge. Once you've figured it out and gotten past this, then go to your next step.